All right, well, let's get right to lesson one. And let me talk a little bit about the user interface before Frame 9. And for those of you that are advanced users, I think we've all figured out ways in which we can start moving some windows. Like, when I'm doing some basic authoring, I typically bring up my paragraph catalog. So I line it up to the right of my document. If I want to edit my paragraph styles in some way, I think we all reach out for the paragraph designer. And if you're a shortcut user like I am, you quickly press Control M and that brings it up, and then you sort of move it below the paragraph catalog. Now the next thing you do is you start working with character styles. So you select your text and you bring up the character designer, Control D, and then of course you move it around so it doesn't block the paragraph designer or the paragraph catalog, and you can start making changes to your character styles. Next thing you do is you start working with the same character styles that you create, and you start applying those to other occurrences throughout your document. So what do? You bring up the character catalog, and slowly but surely you begin to see that your interface is becoming very busy, very obtrusive at that point. You start moving catalogs, and as much as you can move things around. Obviously, if you have a bigger monitor, things are better. But with small monitors and low resolution, things are beginning to look a little bit complicated. And then, of course, if you work with tables, you bring up the table designer. We don't have necessarily a table catalog to apply styles, so you have to bring up the table designer. And then, of course, you can go into the basic ruling, shading, and be able to apply properties in there, go to another table, and then apply the same table style and so forth. And then, of course, if you work with structure documents, you probably have seen the structure view come up at some point. And that, of course, creates a bigger problem there because it's blocking your content. You have to bring up the elements window because you have to apply elements to your structure view. And then, of course, in the end, you also bring up the attributes panel. So I know I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but I'm pretty sure a lot of you agree that this is a likely scenario that we have been dealing with in previous versions of FrameMaker, Frame 8, 7, 7.1, 7.2, 6, 5.5.6. And of course, you do this again and again, and you become quite savvy at closing some dialog boxes and then opening up some of the others. But I think you'll agree that that's not a very good way to work with your products, and certainly there's a better way, and that's one of the drivers behind us reworking the entire user interface, and that's what we introduce in FrameMaker 9. But to really get a good sense for how this works, it's one of those things that you have to see how the before looks for you to appreciate the after. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to screen sharing. I'm going to switch us over to FrameMaker 8 just to kind of give us a little refresh our minds as to how things work at this point. So, all right, so here's a typical FrameMaker 8 document. And again, I want to show you this sort of before and after, because along the way I'm going to be doing the same thing in Frame 9, and I'm going to show you just how much easier and nicer the experience can be. So first thing I would do is I would probably start applying some styles. So I'm going to bring up my paragraph catalog here. And the first paragraph, this is supposed to be a chapter title. And I know you can apply with keyboard shortcuts, but I'm just going to go sort of the basic way here. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to bring up your paragraph designer. So you press Control M, or you go to the Format menu and bring it up from there. Then you start customizing the look and feel of your styles. So you go to the default font and you apply perhaps 30 points, and you change the color and you apply maybe heading color, and you hit update all, then you can see the changes. Then after that, you can go to another chapter and apply the same style. And this is one of the real beauties of Frame, that is very stylized, very template based, which allows you to do a lot with little work. Now, if I want to go ahead and make this go across all the columns and the site hits, I can do that. I can just go to across all columns and site hit, and I can check it out before I commit to it. And now that I've seen that I like it, I can go ahead and hit update all, and as you can see, that'll take care of the rest of the document here. And then I can do the same thing for, say, heading 1. I have my paragraph catalog displayed, so I'm just going to click heading 1. I have my paragraph designer displayed, so I'm going to go to the default font, and I'm going to specify, let's say, 20 points for this, and sort of the same color, heading color, and I'm going to hit update all. And so from that point, any heading one will take on all of these options here. So there's no site hit for that, let's say. Now I'm going to go to page 2. And on page 2, I want to go ahead and highlight a couple of words that are the first time they're used, and that's hue and value and saturation and chroma here. So I'm going to do a couple things here. So I'm going to go ahead and select hue, and I'm going to bring up my character designer. So that's a third dialog box that comes up. And I'm going to go to commands, and I think we've all created some character styles here where we want to set the window to as is so that it keeps a lot of the properties from the paragraph where it's in. So I'm going to set that up, and I'm going to go and say for the angle, I'm going to set this up to italic, and then for the color, I'm going to go with first use color. And then once I have that, I can create a new format. I'm just going to call it first use here, and I'm going to click create, and that did exactly that. It not only created a character style, but it also applied it to whatever I had highlighted. Now if I want to apply the same character style to other occurrences, what do? I go to my character catalog, and now things are beginning to look a little bit uneasy here. And I can go and find some options here like value, and I can of course apply first use in there, and then I can go to saturation, first use, and then chroma and first use, and there you go. So notice that even though I have a pretty big monitor here, I have the paragraph catalog, I have the paragraph designer, I have my character designer, and then I have my my character catalog. And it's about to get worse, because if I want to do anything to my tables, like format them or apply a different table style, I reach for my table designer, and here's yet another box that I have to deal with here. And so what happens is if I want to apply a style called standard table, I have to select it from my table tag, and I have to click apply, and my table now takes on the look of that style. And of course, if I have additional styles, I have to go to each one and then apply standard table and apply, and then make customizations and so forth. But this is a pretty typical workflow, I believe, that our customers have to go through, especially those doing unstructured authoring. Lots of these panels open, lots of pods all over the place, and it's pretty difficult to find your way around this. And of course, things can get even worse when you start dealing with images. So if I go to page 5 here, and I want to deal with this image, and I want to do things to it like, first of all, I want to customize the anchor frame. And I go to the special menu, and I go to my anchored frame option, and of course this comes up, and I can do things like I can send it, I don't know, outside the column, or have it so that it runs into the paragraph, or at the bottom of the column, or at the top of the column. So these are some of the things that I have to do. And every time I'm done with that, I can't really apply that change to other images, because my box disappears, my dialog box disappears. If I want to control the alignment of this image, I pick the image, and I go to the graphics menu, and I select align, and I go and say left align and maybe tops, and click align, and again my align dialog box disappears. So if I want to do that again for another image, guess what? I have to go to the graphics menu, I have to go to align, and I have to do those things. Now the other thing that I can do is, if I want to bring up the properties of this image, I go to the graphics menu, and I go to object properties, and my objects properties comes up. And first of all, I cannot keep this box displayed. I have to commit to the changes that I want to make, like change the scaling percentage or the DPI. I have to click set, and if I want to do the same thing again for another image, I have to go through the steps. So there's a lot of repetition, a lot of calling panels, calling boxes to do these things. And again, if you're an advanced user, you probably have gotten used to it. But I think I think if you embrace the new way of working in FrameMaker 9, I think you're going to find that things are available when you call them up. You can save the location and the display of a lot of these boxes at once. It's really, really cool. So obviously I'm probably exaggerating just a little bit more, but I do want to show you what the before looks like so that I can show you what the after, and that everyone appreciates it a little bit more. Now, if you have structured documents, then it gets even worse because you have to bring up the structure view, and now the structure view is kind of blocking every other dialog box or panel here. And of course, if you do any structure authoring, you are likely to have to bring up the elements panel here, because this is where your structure elements would appear. And you are likely to also have to display your attributes, because as you probably know, structure authoring, one of the things you do is you apply metadata or information about information, and that's how you do attributes here. So let me switch over to FrameMaker 9. And again, I only have a document open here, but I'm going to open up multiple documents in just a little bit. But again, I just want to emphasize again that if you go to the authoring workspace over here, you're going to see the workspaces that are available to you. And so just to illustrate the ones that are available, by default, I believe that we launch with the authoring one. Now, I'm one of those people that like to customize their own workspace, and I think our guys, our engineers, did a marvelous job at sort of guesstimating what pods and panels we would want to use in that particular environment. So these are basically based on environments. So the idea here is that when you're doing some unstructured authoring, it's likely that you need the paragraph designer, as you saw me bring it up, and it's also likely that you might need the character designer and the table designer, and it's likely down at the bottom here that you might be needing to create some system variables and perhaps to even apply conditional tags, and maybe even insert some index markers. And then at the bottom, if you notice, there's the find and change option, and then the history panel, and then toward the bottom here we have additional panels like variables and markers and conditional text and cross references and insets here. And again, this is sort of out of the box experience. This is what our engineering team thought that we would need when we do some basic authoring here, which I think they got it, for the most part right there. Now, if I go to authoring and I want to switch over to, say, data authoring, I'm going to go ahead and do that. What happens here is that a workspace is just a saved sort of layout or user interface that has a series of displayed and available panels and pods. So we call some of these panels and we call them some pods, but that's not really that important. So the idea here is that in data authoring, you may need to have your attributes handy. You may need to have your elements pretty handy so you can apply elements based on where you are in the structure view. And of course, the good old structure view, which allows you to move things around the structure, sort of see if there are any problems with validating the structure and so forth. And of course, we felt that it was also applicable that we would display the markers and conditional text and cross-references and insets and so forth. So this is what the data authoring workspace looks like. Now let me go ahead and review the manage content. Notice how, again, the user interface kind of redraws itself. And here, we thought that it would be important for you to have the paragraph designer, the character designer, the table designer, the replace fonts, which is a great feature, by the way, and one that I'm going to cover in just a little bit. And then, of course, fonts, which tells you what fonts are being used. But replace fonts in particular has been a huge problem in the past because we've all seen that annoying message that says this document uses unavailable fonts. What do you want to do about it? Well, you click and not a whole lot you can do other than to create a MIF, open it up in Notepad, look for the font, delete it manually, save the MIF, and then convert it to FM. And of course that doesn't work. But through the new user interface, we can now identify missing fonts in this document or in all of the open documents, and then quickly replace those fonts with something else and save the document and move on. So that's what manage content allows you to do. And then of course, if there are other panels that just don't fit, you'll see them down at the bottom, and I'm going to get to these guys in just a little bit here, but I'm just kind of going through the workspaces that are built into the out-of-the-box experience here. So let me take a look at Manage Graphics. And I think we're seeing sort of a theme here. Based on the name of the workspace, these are some of the things that you're going to be bringing up, like the Align and Distribute and Anchored Frame and Object Properties, Runaround Properties, and then the Insets down at the bottom as well. Now let me go ahead and move on here. Now if you're doing review, which, by the way, if you haven't seen the new review feature in Frame 9, it's really cool. And I am planning on following up this e-learning session with one that talks about how to do reviews based on PDF using Acrobat.com. So stay tuned for more on that. So you get other things like these much more iconic views, which is really cool because, if I need the Paragraph Designer really quickly, why open it up the whole time when I can just pop it up here, and the character designer and the table designer, and different ways of working with different workspaces here as well. Let me see if there are any more, like structure authoring. Structure authoring brings up the structure view, attributes and elements down at the bottom. Pretty ideal for working with that, no problem. So I wanted to show you so that you can feel comfortable working with these workspaces. And again, these are the ones that we provided. They probably apply for some people, but to me, I'm going to show you a way in which you can create a blank workspace and then start calling different panels and different pods so that you can customize it and make your own workspace and not necessarily have to use the workspaces that we provided here. So a little bit more on that. Now I'm going to go ahead and choose the most basic one here, which is review, so that I can gain a little bit more real estate here. In fact, no, let me go ahead and choose perhaps the most busiest one. Now, there are times when, these panels and these pods, they're great. Workspaces saved. I can call them up anytime. I get all of my options arranged exactly the way that I want them, which is really good. But what happens if I want to focus on just content, on just my document, authoring, typing, using keyboard shortcuts? What happens if I want to do that? Well, one of the things that our new user interface provides is there's a little option right here, and it's next to the Help menu, and it's called UI Visibility. When I hit and zoomed in, let me go ahead and click on it again. I'm going to go ahead and click on that and notice what happens. This is the fastest way for you to completely clear out all the clutter that you have in your FrameMaker 9 user interface, and now nothing gets in the way. You can author, you can do anything you want, and you can still call things up, which are great, because if I want to go ahead and customize this paragraph, I can still press Control M, but the real beauty here is that only my Paragraph Designer comes up and nothing else. So this is one way for you to take advantage of clearing the clutter here. And let me go ahead and bring it back, and again, it just toggles to two views, one with a lot of UI and the other one without UI. So I encourage you to take advantage of that and give that a shot. Now I'm going to skip the one in the middle because I want to show you this other one here. Now this guy is kind of scary, and if you click on screen mode, we have three options. There's the standard screen mode. There is the full screen mode with menu bar, which is exactly that. It just goes to full screen. And then the other one is the full screen mode, which really goes to full screen. But again, this is where it's kind of scary, and I've seen a lot of emails from people, discussions on the forums, that they say, I lost my menus, I lost my my UI entirely, and I can't seem to get it back. So luckily, we put a right-click option. So just go to an empty space here on the right-click on it, and there's an option here that allows you to toggle the screen mode, and that brings you right back into the standard screen mode at that point. So again, no UI visibility and UI visibility, and then of course full screen mode with menu bar, full screen mode, just like that. We're just going to go to really full screen, but right-click on it and then bring it back at that point. Now, the other thing that I want to do is let me go ahead and close this document, and I'm going to bring up a book, which is a pretty typical thing that we all have in FrameMaker. And I'm going to open up my chapters here, and there it is, the unresolved cross-references. I'm going to show you how to deal with those. And a couple of things that I'm going to do. Notice that first of all we have some tabs right here at the top, which are great because it tells us what documents we have open. So Ecology TOC, Resource FM, Concern, Response, and Ecology Index. Now, in the past, if we wanted to, sort of side-by-side documents, we went to the window menu and we said tile or we said cascade or, we did those things. But it was pretty difficult to see where things were going to land and all that. But I'll tell you what, we did something really, really special here. And I'm going to go ahead and hide my UI visibility. And I'm going to go to the middle button here, which is called Arrange Documents. And I want to get a little bit closer so that you can see which one it is. It's that one that has sort of a layout-like icon between the other two that I just showed you. And there are many options here. And these are all pre-configured. And you can see one document at a time. You could see what appears to be like 5 documents vertically positioned there side by side. So you can try these things. And as you become to embrace the new user interface and work with the documents, you're going to find that it's really, really nice to be able to say, 3 up right here, and you have your 3 documents right there displayed. You can go to the arrange documents and you can say, how about 3 down? That's exactly what we give you. You can go here and say, how about 4 sort of equal size right there? And that's exactly what we will give you. And then you can go and try other things, like if you're comparing, the first document and you want to be able to see your index at the top right and then your chapter 3 or chapter 2, you can do that right there. Now, for the documents that unfortunately didn't get their own windows because that's the display that you chose, you can still take these documents. They're just tabs, and watch how easy I can detach them. I can completely undock them or detach them, whatever you want to call them. And always keep an eye on that blue horizontal line, because when you let it go, that's exactly where that document is going to land. So if I wanted my resource document on the left-hand side, and I wanted my table of contents at the top right and also my index, I can do that. Whereas my table of contents was over on the left and I've taken it over to the right, I can do those things. If I want to go ahead and somehow have my table of contents be a completely floating window, just go ahead and grab it by its tab name and let it go. Make sure you don't see that blue horizontal line, and that's exactly what we have done. We have just undocked it and made it completely isolated from the rest. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this back, and I'm going to put it next to the table of contents there. I can do that, and again, keep an eye on that red or blue horizontal line. So again, feel free to explore some of these things. You can even do things like float all in windows. That's exactly what you will get. And of course, you can always come back and just take a look at one document, take a look at 3 up and so forth. Excellent. Okay, so with that said, I wanted to show you those options there. And that was basically exploring the default workspaces, the arranged documents, and some of the other options right there. And I'll tell you what, let me just come back to basic mode here. And that is by putting that back and bringing back my UI right there. Okay, so let's see what lesson 4 is about. So lesson 4, I'm going to be now getting closer to the panels, the pods, and the toolbars. And I also have a practice here where we're going to create a blank workspace that we can use in lesson 5 to be able to create our own very workspaces. All right, so let me come back to frame 9 here and show you just how cool things can be right here. And this is where things get really, really exciting. So I'll tell you what, I like to start by hiding my UI visibility. So if you've been using Frame like I have, you're pretty comfortable with keyboard shortcuts. You know that Control M brings up the paragraph designer, and Control D brings up the character designer, Control T brings up the table designer, and then you start bringing other things like the Alt key, for example. Or if you press Control F, it brings up the find and change and so forth. So one way that I use to become comfortable with this is I said, all right, well, let me see what things kind of feel like from the beginning here without any experience. So here's what I started doing, and I recommend that you do the same. I went ahead and hid the UI visibility, and anytime I wanted to bring up the paragraph designer, I just clicked where I wanted it, and I said Control M, and magically it came up. And again, I say magically, but there's obviously no magic to that. We have these panels. They have different groups. So the paragraph designer by default is also attached to the character designer, the table designer, but it's all in that group. And then once, of course, I was done with that, I said, all right, well, let me go ahead and hide the UI again. What if I wanted to bring up the character designer? I press Control D, and voila, my character designer opened up. And as you can see, it still brings up that group, but at least it highlights the character designer. And then on the other side, I have the paragraph designer and my table designer. And again, I can hide that. And let me go and bring up a table, or bring up the table designer here. And I'm going to do that by pressing Control T, and then my table designer comes up. And as you can see, this is one way that I became and I got really familiar and comfortable with the UI, was by hiding the UI entirely and then starting to use my keyboard shortcuts to bring things up. Anytime I wanted to do some sort of a find and change, I press Control F, and sure enough, my find and change box came up, as you can see right there. And I then hit my UI. So I highly recommend that you go through this exercise. If I wanted to bring up an image, and I wanted to bring up the graphic object properties, I use my Alt key. So I press Alt G and then P, and that means object properties, and then my object properties box came up. So I think you guys are beginning to see exactly what I mean here in terms of an exercise. So that's obviously one thing for you to try. And don't be intimidated by the many different panels that we ship out of the box. I'm going to show you now how you can customize it. Now, the real beauty of the user interface in FrameMaker 9 is the amazing customization level that we have provided our customers. And this is just amazing here. So let me show you. So let's say that I'm in the authoring environment. And by the way, don't be afraid of messing up all of these workspaces, because it doesn't matter how much messing up you do, you can always go to a workspace and you can always do a reset workspace and click OK, and your workspace will come right back exactly how it shipped with the product. So feel free to go and blow everything up if you wanted to, no problem. All right, now here's how it works. First of all, these panels, these are called panels on the right hand side. You can collapse the whole thing, and we give you these little double arrows here toward the right, and I'm going to get a little closer so you can see. They all have that. So if you click on that, you're going to be able to collapse it to a certain point. Now, this is sort of the iconic with text, so I can still see my paragraph designer. I can still see my character designer, my table designer, my variables, conditional tags, markers, find and change, and history. The real beauty of sort of collapsing these is that you can call them up when you need them. They don't take up the whole interface here, and then you can hide them away when you don't need them just by clicking on them again. So you need them, click. You don't need them, click again. They go away. Now, as you become more comfortable with these images and what they represent, like this one paragraph and character and table designer, you can still gain even more real estate, because you can go ahead and collapse these even further. And notice how I'm dragging these guys a little bit to the right until there's no more I can drag. And now all I see are the iconic views. And as you can see, I can go into my paragraph designer, and it opens up, and I click and it goes away. Character designer opens up, I click and it goes away. Table designer, again, it goes away. And again, don't be afraid of playing with this, because at any time you can reset it, you can click OK, and there they are. So they all come right back. So that's one thing. Now, the other great thing about these panels is you can start closing them. In fact, you can close, things that you say, that's great, but no thanks. I don't think I need the system variables just now, so I don't need them. So you can do it in two ways. Now, every one of these tabs is separate. Every one is a panel, and then they're grouped in sort of logical panels here. But if I don't want the system variables to be here, period, just right-click on its name. And there's an option here called Close, and the panel closes. So that's that. That's how easy it is for you to start customizing your own panels here. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can say, you know what? And let me reset it one more time. You can say, I don't want the system variables. I don't want the conditional tags. I don't want the markers. Close the whole thing. Again, right-click anywhere within the title bar and choose Close the tab group. That's exactly what will happen. Maybe you don't want these guys either. So go ahead and close them and close the tab group. And that's exactly what will happen. And slowly but surely, you'll begin to make some customizations here. Now let's go ahead and focus our attention at the bottom of the screen here, where you see the variables, markers, conditional tags, cross-references, and insets. And let's go ahead and do something here. If you click on a sort of an open area of this gray bar, what will happen is you're going to be able to collapse that bar. So let's say that you do need these panels, but you don't need them right at this point. You can go ahead and click on them. They collapse. You can go ahead and click on them again, and then they expand at that point. So that's another way that you can achieve that. In other words, if I go into my reset workspace one more time, and I go ahead and say that, I might need the find and change or the history, but I don't need it right now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on it so I can collapse it and give my system variables just a little bit more room. Or maybe I want to give my variables, conditional tags, and markers a little bit more room. So I'm going to go ahead and collapse my paragraph designer, character designer, and table designer. And notice how that's another thing that you can do. So again, clicking on an empty gray bar area, it's going to automatically collapse them. Clicking on them again is going to display them. Now, what happens if you close some of these things? Let's say that you said, you know what, mistakenly I closed the character or the cross-references. Question is, how do I get this now? Well, as a rule of thumb here, they are pretty much, most of these are exactly where you expect them. In other words, if I go to the special menu and I select cross-reference, which is what I did before, I'm going to get a lot of those panels to come back. That's one way to go about it. So we have not moved much a lot of the options that were there. So feel free to, go to Format, make selections, do some of these things, no problem. The other thing that I highly recommend is that you go to the Window menu, take a look at the panels here, because most of these panels have been sort of centralized and aggregated right here. Here's where you're going to find the cross-reference variables, add, edit, conditional tags, table designer, character designer, paragraph designer, edit system variables, history panel, insets, all kinds of good stuff here. There's another panel right here called toolbars, and this is exactly where you're going to find new toolbars like text formatting, like quick access bar, and the paragraph formatting. And then, not to get confused, but if you go to the view menu, you're going to find some more toolbars right here and some more pods. So we did our best to sort of put them in the places where people would expect them to be. But again, that's a real beauty of Workspaces, because when you build your Workspaces, which you do only once, you're not going to have to rebuild them every time, because things are going to appear exactly where you want them to be. Now let me go ahead and do another reset here, final reset, I promise. And let's do something else here. Let's say that you want to start sort of undocking or detaching a lot of these panels into their own settings for some reason. You can do that. You can go ahead and literally grab the panel by its name and just drag it and drop it like I did a document, and now you have created a panel group, and now you can start customizing this panel in many different ways. So I wanted to illustrate that there, and of course we're gonna come back to this, but let me just go ahead and put it back here to its original format. All right, now here's one of the recommendations that I have for all of you. I really appreciate the workspaces that we have provided here, but I think we all work completely in a different way. We like things to be a little different. We like things to be, we like the paragraph designer to display, but maybe the character designer to display below it and not to the right of it. I think we all work in different ways with Frame, and that's a real beauty of this UI, that it can allow everyone to work in the way that they want. So let me go ahead and show you what I'm talking about here. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close every one of these tab groups. And this is the very first thing that I did when I started working with Frame 9. I said, all right, well, what if I create a blank one? And so I quickly closed them all until I couldn't see any other panel here. And then I said, that's exactly what I want to start with as I build my own workspaces. So I went ahead and closed every panel in every panel group, and then I went to my my workspaces pull down, and I selected Save Workspace. And in fact, I call this blank because this is where I'm going to be basing other workspaces on. So I'm going to call it blank. That's exactly what I get. So from now on, every time I want to start a new workspace, guess what? It doesn't matter where I am. I could be looking at the manage content, and I can go to my pull down, and I can say I want to go ahead and see the blank one, and everything goes away, and now I can start building my own workspace. Okay, so we went through the exploring the default workspaces, arranging documents, screen modes. We talked about panels, pods, toolbars. We just created a blank workspace here, and now we're going to create our own custom workspaces, and I'm going to show you how things work at that point. So I tell you what, let me come back to FrameMaker 9, and notice that I am currently working with my blank workspace here, which is excellent because here I can start building my own workspaces here. And tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and close this document. In fact, I'm going to close all of my documents. We'll come back to some of these in just a little bit. My book, I'm going to close it as well. And the reason why is because I'm going to go and open on my desktop. I have some files that I'm going to be using here. And I'm going to go with the same chapter that I demoed in with FrameMaker 8. And hopefully it's not open anywhere else. No. All right, so we're good. Okay, so I'm going to basically, to put it all together, I'm going to build a workspace that would enable me to apply styles, paragraph styles, character styles, table styles, bring up the character catalog, do some of those things. And again, I like to start with the clean slate here, and blank is, to me, the best way for me to do that. So I'll tell you what, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply a paragraph style here. So I'm going to bring up the paragraph designer. So I'm going to go ahead and press Control M. Now it brings up the paragraph designer, but it also brings up the table designer and the character designer, which I really don't need at this point. So how about I close some of these and then very specifically just bring up the paragraph designer. So notice that even though you may call something up which may bring other panels, don't keep them there. Keep them as clear as you can and in ways that it works for you, and so start closing some of those things. Now, the other thing that I want to do is the paragraph designer is great because it allows me to customize the look and feel and things like that, but we all know that the paragraph catalog is the one that allows me to actually apply styles. And so we don't have necessarily a panel for it, but you can still go and find it exactly where you would expect, which is under Format, Paragraphs, and then Catalog, and it will actually be available as a panel here. So again, you may not find it in too many places, but you will in fact find it under Format, Paragraphs, which is where you found it in previous versions of the product. Once again, this brought up a few panels with it, like Find and Change and History. Well, we all know what to do. Let me close Find and Change. Let me close History, and now things are looking pretty good. I have my paragraph designer and I have my paragraph catalog, but they're actually sort of stacked on top of each other. I don't want that. In fact, I want to go ahead and detach my paragraph catalog completely. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I think I'll show you how to do that. And notice how I have my paragraph catalog right there. Now, the problem with this is floating is good. In fact, this is how it worked in previous versions of the product. But again, we know what happens if we start floating too many of these. It's not a good thing. What I want to do is I want to create its own panel group, its own column, right to the left of the paragraph designer in a very cohesive way here. So watch what I can do. I can grab the paragraph catalog by its tab name and keep an eye on that blue bar, because there's a huge difference when you see that become vertical as opposed to when you see it become sort of horizontal and box-like. So I'm going to go for that horizontal here. There it is. Let it go right there, and guess what? You actually build a new column for that. Now, we don't need that much space, and thank goodness I can go ahead and customize that very easily the way that I want. So for the person who was sharing or asking where the paragraph catalog is, there's your answer there. So that's pretty cool. Okay, well, let me go ahead and make some changes. Like the first one should be a chapter title, which I'm going to go ahead and apply. There we go. and then it should have 30 points and heading color and go across all the site hits. And of course, to do that, I'm going to go to Format, Page Layout, Column Layout, turn the site hits on, entire workflow. There we go. And again, I have my paragraph catalog. My paragraph designer is right here. I want to go to the default font. I want to go ahead and apply 30 points for that. And I want to go ahead and apply heading color. And I want to go ahead and hit Update All. And sure enough, we're doing good. Next thing I want to do is I still have my paragraph designer here, and will have it because this is my layout. I'm going to go to the Pagination Properties and select across all site hits and columns, Update All. Things are looking pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and continue with the next one, which would be this Properties of Color, which is going to be a heading 1, which I can easily apply using my paragraph catalog. I can easily apply the font properties using my paragraph catalog. So 20 points, and also heading color and Update All, and then no site hits for that, so no need to go to my pagination and do that. So hopefully things are making sense there. If you want to provide some feedback, that would be excellent. Now, pretty much done with page 1. I'm going to go to page 2. And this is where we created that character style. So I'm going to select the word hue right about here. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up my character designer, which we all know that I can press Control D, or I can go to the Format menu and bring it up. Now again, the character designer at this point is insisting on attaching itself to the paragraph designer and the panel there. No worries, because I can literally take character designer, and I could detach it, but then again, why? When I can just drag it below my paragraph designer and keep an eye and look for that horizontal blue bar, because that's your ticket to letting go. And of course, that's a character designer. Much, much cleaner design, because I have my paragraph up here, my character down here. You know, I don't have to deal with multiple tabs in the groups and so forth. All right, so let's continue. So I'm going to go to my commands, and I'm going to set the window to as is, and I'm going to go to the angle and choose italic and the color, and choose first use color. And those are the only two settings that I want. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new format and call it first use, and click create. And of course, now that I have it, guess what? I need the character catalog to apply that to other instances of that first use. Well, just as we found the paragraph catalog under the Format menu, we can also find the character catalog also under Format. Here it is, Catalog, and then of course it comes up again, insisting on attaching itself to the paragraph catalog. And of course we don't like that, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and undock it or detach it completely, and instead I'm going to go ahead and grab it by its name and pull it down until I get that very handy blue bar at the bottom of the paragraph catalog. That's when I let it go. And notice how now I can resize this panel to allow a little bit more room for the paragraph catalog and a little bit less for the character catalog. Okay, so I'm getting some good feedback there. I like it now that you have shown it to us. Was not liking it before. There we go, so it's working. Excellent. So here's my paragraph catalog, my character catalog, and now I can go ahead and go to value and apply first use, and go to, let's see, I think I had another one here like saturation, first use, and then chroma and first use right there. Excellent. Now let's deal with the tables here, because that's something else that we're going to have to deal with here. So tables, there's no table catalog, but there is a table designer, and I think we all know that if we can press Control T as in table, we can bring it up. And once again, table designer is insisting on attaching itself to the paragraph designer. Not very good, but I tell you what, we know what to do here. Let's not even detach it this time. Let's just grab it by its name, bring it down, look for that horizontal blue bar at the bottom, let it go, and there you have it. Now we have something that we can work with, because when I'm working with tables, I have it down here at the bottom, easily select it, apply standard table, hit apply, looking good, page down, select this table, again, select the option, standard table, apply. I don't have to call it up. I don't have to stack things on top of each other and really mess up my look and feel. So things are much better. So paragraph catalog, designer, character catalog, character designer, table designer, no additional groups here that are kind of hiding in the background there. Things are perfect. And I think now at this point we can save our workspace and maybe call it unstructured authoring or whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to go to my pull down and I'm going to go ahead and say save workspace, and I'm going to call it unstructured authoring. And I want you to keep an eye on that. So let me get a little bit close. Unstructured authoring. The name really doesn't matter. I'm going to click OK for that. But it's saved, and that's it. So the next time that we need to do structured authoring, for example, we can just easily switch to structured authoring. By the way, I'm going to change some of those things in just a little bit. But as soon as we need to go back and do some basic unstructured authoring, don't rework the whole thing. Just call up your workspace. And to do that, just go to the pull down and say unstructured authoring. By the way, we create a little separation between the ones that you create and the ones that are shipped with the product. So unstructured authoring, and just like that, the whole screen redraws and your pods are exactly where they should be. They don't get in the way of the document. And this is pretty cool. And you can go and hide them if you want. You can bring them up. If you mess them up in any way, say by mistake you grab that and sort of undocked it, no worries. Just go and say reset the workspace. Say OK for that, and it puts it, Frame puts it right back where it should be, right here. No problem at all. Okay. Now, the last thing that I want to illustrate here is what happens if you have a workspace and you realize that you forgot to add a panel. And the question is it too late? And the answer is no. You can actually overwrite a workspace here, although it's not that obvious there. But I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's say maybe down here at the bottom, I don't know. I use the align command quite a bit. So I'm going to go to graphics and I'm going to choose align, and the little panel shows up. And notice how it doesn't show up by itself. It brings a bunch of stuff here. Well, I'll tell you what, let me just undock the whole thing so it doesn't mess up my design right here. Okay, and it brings up the add variables. I don't need that, close it. It brings up that, close it. I want the align, I don't want the markers. So I'm going to close the markers. This is the only thing I want. And I want to put this below my character catalog. So there we go. So this is a great design, and I should have maybe added this before I saved it into a workspace. Well, it's not too late. Just go back and say save workspace, and then basically call it the same thing that you did. So if you call it unstructured authoring, which I did, just make sure you type it the exact same way. Click OK, and you're going to get a little option that says, are you sure you want to overwrite it? Say yes for that, and that's your new unstructured authoring workspace, as opposed to the other one there. So I hope you guys like what you've seen here. Again, blank to me, I have found it invaluable because it allows me to start with a clean slate and then be able to customize things. And just to illustrate my images here, if I want to create one for images, I can go to blank, and then maybe let me see if this has some images that I can work with. Yes. So if I wanted to make the images have, let's say, my align command. So I'm going to go ahead and go to graphics align, and I'm going to display that up there. And I'm going to close all the other ones except for align. Okay, so align should be at the top. The other thing that I want to do is I want to bring up my anchored frame option. So I go to special, anchored frame, and it comes up right below, which looks great. I also want to go ahead and bring up my object properties. So I go to graphics and I go to object properties, and it comes up, but it's actually next to anchored frame. I don't want that. I'm going to go ahead and drag it below it. That's much better. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and maybe bring up my graphic tools, which are also a panel. You can see it over here. But I'm going to go ahead and sort of create a new vertical group for them. And again, look for that vertical line right there and let it go. And that's exactly the design that I want. Actually, I want to get one more panel here. So I'm going to go to panels, and we have this new panel called Insets, which will line up itself at the bottom. And this is a pretty cool panel. Let me talk a little bit about it. The reason why is because it shows you all the images, and you can jump to these images really quickly. Very cool stuff. And by the way, some of these panels show up at the bottom, and there's nothing you can do about them. The reason why is because they require a much more horizontal real estate here. So there's no way I can put this over on the right hand side. But take a look at these panels, because you can go ahead and choose to filter the images that you see from the current document or all the open documents, which is really great, especially if you're working with books and you can't find an image, just display right here. You can also choose resolved insets, which are text insets, or unresolved text insets. We have ones for cross references, missing fonts, and all that good stuff. But really become comfortable with this. The bottom line is, now that I have all of my options exactly the way I want them, I can save the workspace, and I can call them I don't know, my images setup, and I can click OK. So now when I'm working with paragraph, character, and table styles, I can easily just bring up that workspace called Unstructured Authoring. There it is. It looks great. When I get to my images and I want to go ahead and manage them in some way, I can go to my pull down, and I can choose my images setup, and exactly everything comes back. No additional pots that I didn't request. The whole thing is just very, very cool right there. So what do you guys think of all that? So please let me know what you think before we close the session. So really handy before being able to group related commands. I agree with that. The new UI is a long overdue change for the better. Thank you. I agree. So very impressed with new layout. I think it'll help learning curve as well. Yes. And by the way, we're going to post the recording, and I'm going to also recommend that this becomes part of the help system in FrameMaker. As you probably have seen, we can bring in some community content, and this would be a great getting started tutorial for that. You have resolved most of my concerns. Okay. Nice job. Love the new interface. Look forward to using structured data in this interface. Excellent. Thank you for your time. These spots have been frustrating before. I'm glad it worked out. So there's a great comment here. Can't wait to try this. I've gotten used to the old UI and didn't think this would make much difference, but now I know better, and I agree with you on that. Excellent. So thank you. Well-designed presentation. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And give FrameMaker 9 a shot. If you don't have it, download the trial, give it a shot, embrace it. Because I think in the end it'll be a really, really good experience. So thank you very much, everybody. And this concludes today's e-learning session.